Yeah, hello friends, this is Alan Josh and I welcome you to the Learn Up TV and to today's edition of Life Upgrade. Yeah, in the last edition, I began sharing on a series of posts I titled Positioning Yourself for a Meaningful Life of Impact, and I got some very pleasant remarks from the video, but I also got some remarks from some people who said my face was quite tough and strong in that video, like I was fighting someone or angry somehow. And I actually went back to check and I saw that actually my face looked tough and strong in the video. And I remember that day I think I was a little exhausted and I already resolved I was going to shoot that video, and I thought of course I had to just shoot it, so it resulted in that kind of countenance. Regardless, it's still a very loaded video. It has some very valuable tips foundational to this particular one you're watching. So either before you continue or after this video, you want to check the description section of this video to check out that video. It contains something very valuable. I shared on being proactive, very valuable thing. And one recommendation is you might want to just copy or crop out the containers in this particular video and superimpose in whatsoever face you see on that video and enjoy the ride. Okay, I hope you'll be able to do that. Yeah, so in this particular edition I'll be sharing on something I didn't actually intend to share immediately after that first video, but it happens to be a time that coincides with a particular time. Today is just the next day after the birthday of a very important personality, Pastor E.E. Adeboye. A lot of people saying very beautiful things about him here and there, far and wide, everywhere you turn to, on social medias, on WhatsApp status, on Facebook, everywhere you could turn to. Yesterday, 2nd of March, everyone was talking about this man. And it got me thinking about a couple of things, and part of the things I heard people talk about is people trying to share the secrets of what made him so influential. Okay, and then, you know, it happens to be the same kind of thing that I often heard when I read about or heard about this Bible figure, Joseph. A lot of people trying to share success principles from these people with good intentions, and they really always help when people share tips from these people's lifestyle. But I have something I need to say, very important. It's something not many people are talking about regarding this man and regarding Bible figure and many successful people, really. Something very important as I consider it, yet not mostly talked about. And that's the place of resolving to stay in your place. Resolving to stay in your place. Now, I'm going to be talking later on how to find your place, okay? But right now it's going to be about resolving to find or stay in your place. You know, some time ago I used to read about this guy Joseph in the Bible. Joseph was a young boy who had a dream, I think God-inspired dream, and then he had this dream of how he was going to be on top, and you know, all his brothers and even father and mother were going to be subjects to him. He had this dream and then he became victimized. He was sold to Potiphar, eventually to Potiphar, and then he got to the prison somehow before eventually ascended to the throne. And it was a very beautiful story that, you know, was in crescendo right from his young age, and it was a very exciting story. And a lot of times people share from his lifestyle, just like they share from the life of this man, Pastor E.E. Adeboye, whom I will come back to in a short while. But all those while, when I heard or read about Joseph, I often ask the question when people talk about how he was diligent. Apparently he was a very diligent guy, very godly guy, a guy of integrity, very focused guy, a guy who had a vision, and he knew exactly what God would have him do, and he was on course for these things. And then people, especially many very amazing speakers who have heard a lot of us, often share from his lifestyle and share these various qualities as very important to success, and they really are very important to success. However, one question often was predominant in my mind. Do you mean that, and this how the question often comes when I think about this kind of thing, I think about this way, like he had many brothers. Judah was there, Simeon, Gad, and many of them like that, Reuben. And then I often wonder, when you say Joseph became whom he became by all of these qualities of diligence, hard work, focus, and many things, are you saying if Judas had possessed every single one of these qualities, Judah would have been the one in Joseph's position eventually? Okay, does it mean if Judah was as godly as Joseph, he was as diligent as Joseph, and he was as hardworking as Joseph, Judah would have taken some root and eventually would have been the one that ascended the throne and be the one in Pharaoh's palace, being on top and being in charge of things like that? Is it really so? I had these questions in my mind, and the same question comes to mind today when I hear people talk about somebody like Pastor E.E. Adeboye and how God has so raised him to become a man of influence, apparently a man of influence. When we look at men of God in Nigeria and Africa, and arguably in the whole world, Okay, you talk about men who are influenced, in present day. He probably might not be the most eloquent of men, and many people would agree that he's even the most sound teacher, arguably. And then many people might not agree he's the most stern teacher of holiness or abstinence and the likes. And then he's not an indulgent teacher who teaches just behave anyhow. So none of this in itself is an enough explanation for the reason for his influence. Nevertheless, we see the major principles, the basic principles that make for a successful person, shown in his life, and we can see how these things helped him to attain to the position that he is right now. I made a statement in the last post where I said something like, it is up to you how much of what God wants you to be that you can be. It is up to you how much of it you're going to be is based on your hard work, based on how you align yourself with principles, adhere with these principles, and work with these principles. However, I said something about it is not all up to you exactly what you're going to be like. What role you're going to play. You see, this whole world was created by someone. God created the whole world. He created this whole world with a mission in mind. He created this whole world with purpose in mind. And every created thing, of course, He's put humans to be head over all of this creation, but everything created is for His pleasure. He has His story, His writing. Everything has their place, has the place they play, the role they play in this whole story. You have your role to play. I have my role to play. The particular roles each and every person and each and everything is to occupy sovereignly is determined by God. And that was it in the case of Joseph. God was responsible for Joseph's dream. He was responsible for what Joseph was going to become. However, Joseph's journey, how he became it, whether he became it, how he performed along the line was based on his alignment with principles and his decision and his commitment to applying godly principles towards that vision of God for his life. So you see, there was a place of commitment, there was a place of diligence, there was a place of many principles of success. However, something is clear there, that Joseph's becoming whom he became was not totally a product of just a devotion to those principles of success. And when I think about the life of this man, Pastor E. Adeboye, too, you really can pinpoint to something and say this man is the smartest of all men or the smartest of all men of God, and that's why he's all he is. Okay, you really can pinpoint any single one of such. However, he is consistent, he is diligent, he is godly. He has many qualities that make for a successful person. However, I am of the opinion of the belief that there are many people who have these qualities, yet they don't have the kind of outputs or the kind of results he has from a physical standpoint, from a human standpoint. It shows something there, that beyond just adhering to these principles, there is a God factor, which is a sovereign plan of God, which is putting you in a particular role in this whole story. The story is not about you. The story is about Him. It's about His goodness. And He has different ways of demonstrating His grace, demonstrating His goodness. And He has demonstrated His goodness, His grace in a unique way in the life of this man, Pastor E. Adeboye. He doesn't have to demonstrate it in exactly the same way in your own life. And so, as you aspire, as you work towards becoming better in life, in the things of God, you don't really have to be like Joseph in actual sense, because it's not always visible. You may not be exactly like Daddy Gio, but one thing you can always learn is learning from the principles that help them to achieve the feat they achieve in what God wanted them to be. But ultimately, you want to become somebody, and that's you want to be whom God wants you to be. And this is how it works sometimes. When you choose to be whom God wants you to be, you write, or rather, you submit yourself unto God to be used to write a particular story, a particular portion of His soul story, demonstration a particular dimension of His goodness, His grace. Sometimes what God wants to demonstrate is how His grace can shoot a man within a short while, collapsing, because it's not limited by time, it's not limited by space. So sometimes He wants to use you to demonstrate this, and sometimes you might not be in the most admirable position in this whole story. Sometimes He could raise you up, you could become outstanding, you could become admirable, and suddenly He raised some other guy, and the guy from human standpoint seems to be just above you in no time. It shouldn't be a pattern. That's how I view life, for example. There are people who at a point, from a human standpoint, look like I was ahead of them, and suddenly from a human standpoint, they look somehow ahead. They were really not behind. They are really not ahead. But from a human standpoint, humans view things differently. And God has a way of demonstrating His goodness, His grace. So when I see these people whom God raised from a position that seemed lower at a point, and suddenly they're now much higher. It doesn't really perturb me now because of this light into God's mind. That if it demonstrates God's goodness, if it demonstrates a dimension of God's grace, if it propagates the glory and the grace of God, even if it doesn't, put me in the most admirable position in this whole story, my rejoicing, my joy, my gladness should be in this, that God is glorified eventually. Yeah, so you want to find your place and you want to stay in there. Make it not just be about ambitions of being better than someone else, or looking more admirable than someone else, or looking more influential than someone else. It can be the way of many people and how many people see life. But you see, there's so much peace, so much joy that comes with finding your place and staying there, understanding this God's perspective to life, that this life is about the story of God's goodness, God's grace, God's glory. Not about you, not about me really, but about God. I've got a role to play. Find your own role, the portion of the whole story that you're to play, which is out of God's purpose, out of which the vision of God for your life shoots out. Find this place and stay in there. Now I'm going to be sharing in a subsequent post on how exactly to find your place and to stay in there. But if you're new on this channel, you want to hit the subscribe button and hit the notification. Be on the lookout for subsequent posts. And if you have not followed me on my various social media handles, I'm there on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on LinkedIn. So you should see the handles somewhere on the screens, maybe below or on top, or maybe at the description section of this video. So follow me on these platforms and let's just ride together. Once again, my name remains Alan Josh, and I'm going to be right back shortly. Have a great time.